Okay, so hey everybody, thanks for joining the call today. I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first few couple slides in the presentation, um, people could miss and still capture all the important stuff. So first, I just want to introduce myself. I know some of you who are joining the call, but not all of you. So my name is Roger Gietzen. Um, I'm a medical doctor. I'm a neurologist from Michigan, United States. And how I got interested in Syntropic was in 2015, I started going to Haiti for humanitarian work and became more interested in doing community development than medical work. And in 2000, and started doing like backyard gardens and composting. And then in 2016, I saw the Life in Syntropy video, which a lot of you probably have seen before. And it inspired me that it was a tool or method that could be used in Haiti. A lot of people already know Haiti has severe poverty and also severe environmental issues due to deforestation. And I started a project and now have a nonprofit called Global Freedom Project. And essentially our main project is training people syntropic agroforestry in the country. And I have two Brazilians who come regularly, Paraguay and Mauru. And we've been traveling twice a year since 4 years now. And I've learned a lot from having them come. Their input is, for those who know the Abundance Agroforestry guidebook that I wrote, their presence started after that. So what I'll be presenting today is essentially the same materials we present in Haiti that I've developed since the guidebook. And I just felt like I always feel like a student with Syntropic, and that like I'm always learning something new. But finally, I had this bug under in me that said I should start sharing what I have and just kind of giving it to the public domain and seeing what people do with it. So yeah, so that's what led to this lecture, and I hope it helps people, and I hope it also helps the work I do in Haiti, because the more I teach, the more I learn how to be a better teacher. So, okay, just a couple logistics. Looks like everybody here knows this already, but appreciate you muting when you're not speaking and then unmuting when you want to say something so the audio is good. Also, please look in the chat. I put a link to a Google form, and if people click on that, you can send me your contact email and phone number if you want to be notified of additional trainings. To give the full content that we usually give in our 4-day training in Haiti, I would need to do 2 more sessions kind of like this online. And I do hope to do those. The dates of those aren't scheduled yet. It will be in the next month or two. And those will go deeper in the theory, and also will cover design and management. So yeah, make sure you go into the chat, click on that, and give me your information. Also want to make it clear that it's okay to pause me and ask me questions during this presentation if something comes up, as long as it's not too many questions and we can get through this material. Usually if one person has a question, other people do as well. So, and the last thing before I get started that I want to mention is, as far as I know, Ernest has still not published like a really comprehensive set of educational materials for syntropic agroforestry. And so what you're getting is my interpretation. It's me, like many other people teaching, are grabbing pieces of puzzles that we can find, and then putting together a full picture on our own. And some of the things I'm saying, maybe Ernst would disagree with, I don't know. So I'm doing my best to both stay true to what he's teaching, and then also meet the needs of the people in Haiti that I'm teaching, who a lot of which cannot read or write, so requires some simplification of what I've learned. And believe we have done that successfully without losing any quality in this work. So, okay, that was kind of a long intro. So welcome to the lecture. For those who don't know, syntropic agriculture is a paradigm shift from normal agriculture. And instead of focusing solely on your crop and controlling nature and the elements and everything else, all for the benefit of this crop, which instead in Syntropic, what we do is we look from a holistic standpoint, and we're looking at what is healthy for the system as a whole, and taking actions that improve the health of the system as a whole, which then automatically provides what's needed for our crop. We'll touch on this more. It does cause some challenges for people who've had a lot of formal training in agriculture, because so much is emphasized on micromanaging, chemistry, and local environment. And this might seem odd. This picture, I think, for those who aren't familiar with Syntropic, is it's hard for them to imagine. This is a transitional system. This was once a large-scale soy plantation, commercial soy crop in Brazil that has now been transitioned to coffee using the Syntropic method. And big thanks to Daniel for sharing this photo with me. And it just helps you see, okay, we're growing coffee, but look at everything else that's in there. You can probably see bananas and trees and grass, and it all in the end is helping to grow the coffee. And why take all these extra efforts to create an ecosystem to grow your food, to focus on the system? And most of us in this, I might be preaching to the choir, but most of us know that there's a global crisis now relating to our ecosystems. There's a shortage of clean air, clean water, and fertile soil. And I believe, and there's a lot of evidence to support, that forests are important in maintaining all three of those things. So a form of agriculture that embraces and promotes healthy forest systems is going to help address these crises. And if you watch the news, you already know that there's more and more desertification happening in the land. There's unpredictable weather with flooding, drought, high levels of pollution, fire. A lot of these problems, maybe all of these problems, we can say are related to human activity in its attempt to make life easier for us. But in the end, creating a situation where the planet may not be inhabitable. What I think a lot of people don't know is that conventional agriculture or human farming techniques are one of the largest factors contributing to this crisis. And that's because it's extractive. We take a fertile, complex living system, destroy it, and of course there's fertility there, but then we go ahead and we extract. And we think about the short-term rewards, but don't calculate in the long-term cost. And soon our years and years of behaving this way are going to catch up to us. And whether economists like this type of farming, or people who have the money like this type of farming or not, I think there's going to be coming a time soon where people have to think about the future effect of our agriculture on the soil. And methods that are regenerative, like Syntropic, are going to become more and more popular, in my opinion. And part of the reason we're in this situation with agriculture is it was never designed with promoting fertility or aligning with nature. Agriculture came, the modern agriculture, the green wave that we have now, Okay, I'm told that people can't see anything. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share and jump in. I did notice a whiteboard notification, which, yes, there is somebody, uh, somebody may not have noted it, but somebody created a whiteboard. I'm going to undo that. Be careful with hitting the buttons. One of the great things about Jitsi is it's open source. But one of the problems with it is it's just about everybody in the can control it. Okay, can I get a feedback? Are people seeing the slides? Okay, cool. I'm just gonna go back a couple. These are some of the images. I'm not sure where the whiteboard popped up, but I was just showing. I was showing pictures of the current human activity resulting in soil degradation. Okay, and where I was last mentioning is the current conventional agriculture actually has its roots in warfare. So at the end of World War II, there was a large war industry that no longer had buyers. And so the war machines were repurposed and and marketed to farming. Not only tractors, but also chemicals and airplanes. There was also a large chemical um, industry that needed a market. Not only did that market become modern medicine, but it also became it also was marketed to modern agriculture. So a lot of what we do in farming was never with nature in mind or what's best for the soil. It was what's best for the industry. Yeah, if anybody's not getting the presentation as their main visual, thanks ALO for noting that. If you just press on that, it should come up as your main visual. And um, yeah, I think most of the people on this call probably are aware that this war machine way of farming, this extractive way of agriculture is causing scarcity. It also, as we'll learn later in this lecture, is affecting water absorption into the soil, so our clean water supply. It's affecting, of course, the soil quality and also clean air, which trees are important for doing. And it's my hope that through the activities of people like us, more and more people will be aware of syntropic farming and other regenerative farming. This image is taken from Ernest's farm in Brazil. This is a cacao farm. And I use this picture to help people understand how it's possible to work with nature. And also for those people who don't like the rows in syntropic farming, I like to show this picture so they see as it becomes more mature, the system becomes more chaotic and the rows are less visible. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and I'm covering some of the science. Okay, I got um, so I don't see the whiteboard. Whoever, Gabrielle, try leaving the meeting and then joining the meeting again. And anybody else who's having a hard time seeing the presentation, try leaving and joining again. And yeah, if anybody can be careful not to click the whiteboard option because then that comes up and obscures the background. So I'm going to shift now the presentation to talk a little bit about the soil science that supports syntropic agroforestry. I learned this after learning the technique. Okay, hey Gabriella, can you confirm? Okay, cool. Um, so those people who've studied Elaine Ingham or Christine Jones, they're very aware that all soil has the potential to be fertile. This graph I'm showing here is a image taken from a study where they took soil samples from land all over the world, both fertile and degraded land. And what they found is total nutrient levels, including micronutrient levels, are found in abundance in all soil, even degraded soil. Um, but this is different than what a typical soil test that is done by agricultural institutes looks for. The typical soil test looks for available nutrients. And what we're seeing here is total nutrients. So a lot of these are locked up. And what we like to use the analogy and when we're training in Haiti that plants that are planted in soil where the nutrients are all locked up, it's a lot like a baby that's starving and but there is an abundance of food nearby, like rice that just needs to be cooked. Okay, how does nature solve this problem if there is this abundant fertility? How does nature take degraded or bare land and restore fertility? And so the answer is a forest. A forest is what happens if you don't disturb nature and if there's bare land. And this is ancient knowledge. Indigenous farmers for many years would allow degraded farmland to rest. And they call it fallow. They would come back years later. Initially, when sometimes they would even leave it for decades, and a forest would grow. They knew if they harvested that forest and they came and started farming again, that fertility would be restored. What they didn't know, as far as I'm aware, is they didn't know how to farm simultaneously with the forest, at least not in the same degree that we know now. And nowadays, we don't have the luxury to leave land for many decades. We can't wait decades for soil fertility to return. And in a lot of places, like in Haiti, there's not enough space to just let a forest grow for decades and go farm somewhere else. We're required now to be more conscious with how we use land and to come up with a solution. And syntropic farming is one of those solutions that allows us to restore fertility while we farm. So if you're following me so far, then your next question is, if forests are the solution, then let's learn more about what is a forest, okay? So a forest is more than just two trees standing side by side. Forest is an entire living system. It requires a diversity of trees, and I would argue, maybe this isn't the conventional definition, but I would argue it requires many other life forms too. Other plants and animals which help with the cycling of nutrients and germinating of seeds. And maybe the single most important life forms that make up a forest are what we don't see. So in the soil and also on the trunks of trees and the leaves of plants are in a healthy forest are you will find countless microorganisms. They're still studying and learning a lot of what the microorganisms that are important, but these include bacteria, protozoa, fungi, algae. Okay, people who, yeah, anybody who's joining, please just mute here, I think. Yeah, just mute yourself if you're not talking for the quality. Cool. And why are soil life so important? This goes back to the slide I showed a few minutes ago, where all nutrients are available in excess, even in degraded soil, but they're locked. Okay, so soil life is the key that unlocks that. Tried to capture this in an image here. Soil life is what eats these nutrients. It's available to these microbacteria and other microlife. And then when they die or they are consumed and or defecate, that nutrient is now in a form that is plant available. And here I tried to show how this works for the plants. And so there is a symbiosis. The microlife require an environment to thrive, and that environment is best created by a forest or plants that are densely and diversely covering the soil. That they lower the temperature, they help the plants in the forest help for water infiltration, um, they bring the environment that the microlife need, and then, as I've mentioned, the microlife provide what the plants need, which is these nutrients they otherwise couldn't access. And what's interesting about symbiosis, it's an on-demand feature, and the additional factor that plants bring that the microlife needs is carbohydrates or sugars. So plants, through photosynthesis, have an abundance of carbohydrates. They um, they can manufacture them basically out of thin air with sun, right? And when a plant needs more nutrients, it needs to grow, it knows to release some of these sugars through its roots. That process is called root exudates. And when the sugar is released through the roots, it creates like a feeding frenzy at the root zone with all these microlife. And that feeding frenzy results in a turnover. Both they're defecating and they're eating each other. And that turnover causes a release of nutrients that are available then to the plant. So the plant has to work for it a little bit, it has to give some sugars, but when it does that, it gets the nutrients it needs at the moment it needs it. Imagine trying to trying as a farmer to provide similar nutrients. It's just impossible. You would have no idea when the plant has a need and then how much to give it. So the beauty of this symbiotic system, which is already in place, is it provides the plant exactly what it needs. Here's an image taken by Phil Lee of root exudates. So the white filamentous structure in the back is the root, and then the droplets that you see are the exudates. And this is a very important path. They now call this the liquid pathway or the liquid carbon pathway. It's a very important path for soil regeneration. It's actually far more important than the old, I guess we'll call it the solid pathway of just decaying organic material when it comes to the soil microlife and soil regeneration. And how do we know our plants are using the liquid pathway? How do we know that this symbiosis is occurring? And this picture shows us. So those are root aggregates. This is, I believe, a wheat plant. And this is from a study called the JENA experiment, JENA. It's highly recommend watching Christine Jones videos where she talks about this. And in most conventional agricultural operations, if you pull the plants out, you will not find root aggregates. This is something that's you only find in regenerative systems. So when the plants have healthy associations with microlife. And when you see root aggregates, you know that the plant has a healthy relationship with the soil. You also know that it's fixing nitrogen. Um, um, there, um, there is newer soil science that shows that not only leguminous plants fix nitrogen, but any plant that has a soil aggregate is fixing nitrogen through free living nitrogen fixing bacteria. And any studies that don't take into account those bacteria um, are really limiting their analysis of soil regeneration. So this is a really cool picture that helps us see what happens in a healthy plant and soil life situation. What I think is important to mention at this point is fertilizers that are high in nitrogen disrupt this symbiosis. Even organic fertilizers, so fresh manure and probably urine or urea, really high nitrogen containing fertilizers, and of course chemical ones as well, they will shut down um, this symbiotic relationship, and the plant won't go through the work to provide soil exudates, and aggregates won't form. Okay, I'm going back to this picture. If you look closely, does anybody see the very first or most distant roots are bare? You notice how the roots closest to the plant have the aggregates, but the other ones are bare. That's because when they did this study, they gave a one treatment, high nitrogen treatment, right when they first planted this seed. And so the initial growth of that plant occurred without the healthy symbiotic relationship forming. And then they didn't give any additional nitrogen fertilizer. And you can see as the plant continued to grow, then it developed correctly. So adding fertilizers, if they're high in nitrogen, disrupt a healthy regenerative cycle. Sure, manure or compost, really biologic, organic inputs are going to have low nitrogen levels and they won't cause this problem. And they're okay, but really not sustainable if you have a large operation. Okay, and I want to now talk about another. This is the last soil microlife we'll talk about. There are many, and they're being studied, but I think soil fungi is one that most people should know about because soil fungi or mycorrhiza can increase the zone of a plant's roots reach 7 times. So in this image here, we have a pine tree seedling. And if you look closely, I'm trying to, I don't know if you can see the cursor, but the roots itself are these darker orange roots. And all of the white filaments that you see here are mycorrhiza. So in a healthy plant, um, the microlife are extending its reach for water. These mycorrhiza connect with those from other plants, and they work like a worldwide web, and they have been proven in research to share immunity. When one plant is affected by a disease, it can message additional plants through the soil fungi, and they will share information and immunity. So this is very important. This is what one of the most important members of forming the soil food web. And I tried to find an image here that that visualizes this soil food web. And when we're working in Syntropic agroforestry, it's the soil food web that we're interested in. We're trying to create a thriving, busting microlife with lots of soil fungi. And this is something you can see with your eyes. Once you have a mature system with lots of fungi, you can dig a soil in the earth and see the white filaments, and you know you're heading in the right direction when you're doing that. You can pull a plant out and see the aggregates. You can know you're going in the right direction. Your plants will be greener. And we know we're learning how to do this because of nature. Nature is in the process of natural succession, which I alluded to earlier, achieves all of this that we're talking about. If you don't disturb nature, it will bring in plants that can restore soil and improve the condition for later plants. and little by little, the soil microlife will um, become more and more abundant and produce soil that is fertile for even finicky plants. The only problem with natural succession is it's very slow. And so that's where syntropic farming comes into place. Syntropic farming um, observes, learns from natural succession, but it optimizes it by bringing in the most amount of plants you can over a portion of land. And then it speeds the process up through heavy pruning and management. And in this image here, you see a overgrazed farmland on the left in Brazil. And then you see an after picture from the exact same property about 3 years later, um, where a syntropic farm has been implemented, and you can see the amazing results and how quickly syntropic farming can restore land. And um, for those who really don't have any experience with syntropic farming, this is a visual I tried to create to help people understand how it works. Um, on the left, the far left, is the part of the farm that mimics a natural forest. And in this case, I titled it a biomass system because one of its key features is it's a very productive in organic matter. In the middle image, you would see what is similar to a typical orchard or farm system. And so that's the part of the farm that the farmer is growing for human crop production or harvest. In a syntropic system, we generally have far more. We would have a polyculture, not a monoculture system. But anyway, I wanted to keep the visual simple. And a typical syntropic system integrates both the biomass and the production system. That's how you get this system. And if you choose the species correctly, they work together. They don't compete. Just as a forest can be messy, but at the same time, all thriving. And for those who have a hard time visualizing how this works, the trick is the heavy pruning. So if you just planted in density and then left it, of course, your system would slow down and it would become unproductive because too many plants would start shading each other. And so the important element that makes this all work is the human has to come in and do heavy pruning and observe when the time is right to open up the canopy, allow the sun to come back in, and to produce a growth pulse. We'll talk about that a little more. And Ernest learned this, as I understand, he learned the purpose and the value of heavy pruning from hurricanes. He, at this point, was restoring the property in Brazil and had his cacao plantation was up and running, and he had been planting diversity, and a storm came through, a hurricane knocked down the emergent trees, the upper level trees, and he noticed that he had one of the best yields of cacao that year. Um, but he didn't quite get the message fully. And then the same thing happened 2 consecutive years in a row. And after the second year, and he saw he again had a bumper crop of cacao, just the most you would typically expect. He got the message and he realized, okay, nature is trying to teach me that I need to create a better and more heavy disturbance. And it was from then on that he pledged to prune like a hurricane. And so in this image, I try to capture that. On the left, you see the biomass system growing with the production system. It's starting to get too shaded. Then in syntropic farming, we come in and prune like a hurricane. On the right, you see all of a sudden there's more space. And this is a dance that happens regularly, multiple times a year, at least once a year, heavy pruning in a typical syntropic system. And it's the magic that makes the soil fertility return so quick. So I'm going to just briefly summarize what we've covered so far. Yeah, the trick to syntropic farming is mimicking a dense forest, which is often called a consortium, this association of plants. And then we come in with heavy pruning, and I refer to that as cutting, and we use the material from that pruning to cover the soil, or covering. So these are the three keys that we'll go into deeper to help us understand and make sure that we're doing syntropic farming correctly. Let's see if I can get you guys to interact a little bit. Now that we've discussed practices, soil quality, and anybody unmute themselves and just give me a practice that's harmful to soil quality. What are some things we're doing now?
Tilling monoculture.
Yep.
That's probably the big ones.
And heavy use of chemical fertilizers.
Yep.
Fungicides,
Exactly.
pesticides, stuff like that.
Totally. And
Did someone
in
say
Haiti,
plastics?
oh, say that again.
Plastics is also like
Yeah,
unburned or even plastics. Yeah.
plastic mulch, especially, which I understand why some people use it, but harmful to the the microbiome. Okay, I'll show the answers I had come up with. Yeah, monoculture. Thanks, Gabriella. I think the only one we didn't mention in the group is slash and burn, which it's happens in Haiti and in other places, but maybe not in the places the current guests. Yeah, so monoculture, or missing diversity, and also what I noticed I have here on the last slide is perennial plants and trees. So it's not just the diversity, but plants and trees that stay. Yeah, Nitin, go ahead and
Yeah, Roger. I think in the whole of Southern Africa, they use slash and burn quite often because of the early rains that come, and then they have this grass left over from the dry season. And in Zambia, we call it the Chitemene system, where slash and burn is pretty common.
Yeah. Yes, it's common in many areas. Of course, it achieves a goal. It makes it easier for them to get in and plant again, but at a great cost. And syntropic farming would provide a alternative way to get your crops without setting back natural succession. Go ahead, Nitin.
Sorry, I actually was trying to lower the hand.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks for the contributions. Okay, I'm going to shift gears in the presentation. That section we just covered is kind of like the soil science, and then there was that little recap at the end to help understand the basic three elements in syntropic farming. Now I just want to do a little bit of like a sales pitch, because a lot of people cannot believe what you can do with syntropic farming. It's just not in their experience that an agricultural system can produce these benefits. So the next few slides will go through things like recharging springs, resisting drought, how irrigation becomes optional, resisting fire. And I have testimonies and actual examples for these benefits. So let's start. So I think most people can imagine when you have perennials and trees, their roots create channels in the soil that help with soil absorption, but also the aggregates I mentioned earlier. So these clumps of earth that can grow along the roots also help with soil, and maybe are more important with soil water absorption, because they're they're like a sponge. They have air in them. And so they create conditions for good soil water absorption while still protecting the plants from water logging, which is when water starts to suffocate the roots. And soil water absorption is key for clean water. It's, of course, how we fill the water table below the ground, which then comes up with clean, charged water. And this slide, which thanks to Calvary Calling for creating this animation, I think it can help people see how soil water absorption recharges springs, and it's important for human health as well as the ecosystem. And along those same lines, when you're retaining water, when you're having soil coverage, syntropic agroforestry helps resist drought. So these images are not a syntropic agroforest, but they are a simple form of regenerative agriculture. And these images are from a country in Africa. I'm not sure which one. And what's shown here is two areas of the same farm in the same year when a severe drought came during what would have been a normal rainy season. And the only difference, the farmer planted all the same plants. He planted corn in association with jack bean. And the only difference between these is the image on the right, he had been doing that same practice for 7 years. Whereas the image on the left was the first year he had used that new area of land with this association. And you can see through 7 years of cover cropping using jack beans and corn had obviously improved the soil fertility. It's obviously resulting in a much better harvest. This is probably all related to its ability in protecting soil microlife, okay, and creating the conditions for that liquid pathway to bring fertility to the soil. And syntropic farming also helps resist fires. So this is an image from Brazil. This is thanks to Paraguay. He's one of the team members who comes to Haiti. And that lenticular shaped green area, that half circle, is his property close to his home that he had been working for many years. And surrounded by it is conventional farming for a grain or grass, I forget which. And what you can see here is they had obviously a massive fire come through, and his system was too green, too moist to catch fire. And I will mention that he just growing the close association of trees isn't enough for this to protect you from fire. He had to come in and do pruning and management, especially one last time before dry season. That's what creates a green regrowth during the dry season that prevents fire. Unfortunately, this same system, he wasn't able to manage the last 2 years because of a new job in agroforestry. And they had a fire come through just this last year, and his system did catch on fire. So it proves the point that not only do you have to have a syntropic planting, but you also have to manage it to get this benefit. And I suppose there may be some fires that will destroy anything in their path, but it's definitely resisting fires, as we can see. Another example of resisting drought and reducing the dependency of irrigation is this example from Inga Foundation, which is in Honduras. They have symptoms which could be seen as very simple syntropic systems. So they plant and teach the locals to plant a single species of tree called Inga edulis usually, in rows similar to syntropic, and every year they heavily prune them and use the material for mulch. This farmer planted these beans in his system, and from the time he planted the beans till the time the harvest was complete, there wasn't a drop of rain that fell, and he did not use irrigation. And why did this work? Because the systems hold water. even in places with severe drought, if you go into the forest, if you have healthy forest, and you go and remove the leaf litter and put your hands in the ground, you'll find the soil is cool and moist. And that's exactly what you get in your system here. I'm not saying you can grow any plant without irrigation. Beans are, of course, are more hardy, but it definitely extends your ability. Here's an image from Restoring the Soil, Roland Bunch's book, helping to show the increase in yields. And now there's so much data out there, actually. But just to have an exact testimonial, I believe this is from Guatemala. This farmer was losing his land because the harvest was becoming less and less. He was down to the point where he's getting like one ear of corn per plant, and they started teaching him regenerative techniques, which was growing in association with leguminous plants. Here, after a few years, he's smiling because now each corn plant is giving 3 ears of corn. And Roland, the author of this book, was most impressed that his son is in the back of the picture, because in their communities, the youth are leaving the land because of the situation that most of the farmers face. And when we can start to turn things around for them, show them that there's economic viability, we also help to protect the future for their youth. And if any of this is any questions, feel free to put up your hand as we go. Here's another benefit. So regenerative agriculture prevents soil erosion. And one of the ways it does that is those soil aggregates we're talking about. And I've done this test. It's a little tricky to do it right, but it's possible to do this exact test on your own, and the results are really striking. So on the right, you have a piece of earth taken from healthy soil. So I would normally look for an area that has lots of weeds and plants, and it's like really covered with growth, and grab a clump of earth, okay? It's most likely going to have a lot of aggregates in it. The other soil was taken from farmland that was tilled, that the soil was bare. There was no perennial crops. You could also find a pathway where people walk, and the earth is cracked and dry. Okay, and then that's your other sample. And let's look at the video. What happens when you expose those two samples to water? What happens when it rains on a typical farm? In Haiti, I can tell you what happens. All the soil goes out into the river. The rivers are just full of dirt and mud. In fact, I suspect many Haitians believe that's just normally what a river is supposed to look like after rain. But if you have healthy ecosystems, if you have healthy farming systems, it doesn't happen. A lot of the soil goes into the earth, and if it does pass through, it's not taking your soil with it. Here's another visual. This is an image where they planted a dense mix of vegetation in one tub and nothing in the other. They have two drainage PVCs. You can see the lower one at the bottom, and then the other one, which is oriented to catch any runoff at the surface. Let's see what happens when they pour the water in here, and notice the side by side. What we should notice is on the left, more water comes out the top PVC because the water doesn't even go down into the tub, and it comes out black. Look at the water pictures. Whereas the one on the right, you'll see more of the water is absorbing into the soil. And so more of the water is draining out the lower PVC, and it's coming out clean. Okay, regenerating soil protects from soil erosion. It's building up our water table. It's creating clean, drinkable water. It's what we need to be doing on a regular basis. Okay, we're making great time. This next slide here, maybe one of the most important features, and maybe the reason that more and more conventional farmers are interested in regenerative agriculture is its ability to resist disease. And my observation and my interpretation of how it resists disease is because it's holistic. It's similar to the human gut. We have healthy bacteria in our gut, and a lot of people may have heard or known when you take too many antibiotics, you kill the healthy bacteria in your gut along with the pathogenic organism you are treating. And those people are at risk for infection. There is a specific infection called C. diff, which can cause horrible inflammation in the stomach. And this is similar to what happens in a farming system. If you're using chemicals, if you're not supporting natural, healthy microlife, not only in the soil, but the microlife that's found on the stems and the leaves, then your plants are naked. They're vulnerable. There's like this. There's no shield to protect them. And so, and if those plants have any nutritional deficiencies, or if they're in soil that's not fertile enough for them, they will attract disease, because disease is not the root cause of their demise. It's a messenger. It's trying to return the system to where it should be. So I'll give another example. So this is a holistic perspective. The disease is just a message that there's a problem in the system. If you're talking about a person, if they're stressed, sleep deprived, and they get sick, what is most important to focus on? Taking a bunch of over-the-counter remedies and suppressing your symptoms, or working on the root cause of the stress, getting good quality sleep, eating healthy food? I think we all know the answer there. And sure, if farmers want to just treat the disease with insecticides and pesticides, that's fine. But they can't complain if the problem keeps happening, if they need more for more inputs the next year and more and more. The root cause of the sickness is unaddressed. And there's studies now that show that show that through plant sap analysis, when a plant is diseased, you can give the plant the missing. You can find out exactly what micronutrients missing, give it to it, and it will return to health without really treating the disease. And that's how syntropic farming works. A lot of people with syntropic farming, they ask, well, what plant do you use in your system to treat this nematode or this fungi or this disease? And that's not the that's not how it works in my perspective. Syntropic system, you don't even need to focus on protecting from one particular pathogen. You create a healthy system and it resists diseases in general. If you create plants that have their needs met, they don't get sick. So I know there are plants that help and treat particular insects and pests, but the farmer, I would encourage them to think from a holistic perspective. And if if their farm's getting disease, then what is the root cause and how can you strengthen the system as a whole to prevent it? And there's a couple real life examples. People may know Ernest's own cacao farm was in the epicenter of a disease in Brazil called witch broom disease that totally knocked out chocolate production in that area. He had the disease show up on his farm, but it did not affect his production. There's also the people who've watched Life in Syntropy know Toca Fazenda, the farm, the citrus farm, the middle of the three examples that are given. That was in an area of Brazil that had endemic citrus greening disease, which is destroying crops of citrus trees worldwide. And they found that any new syntropic plantings did not contract the disease. and areas of the farm that already had the disease, where they transitioned to syntropic, the trees became productive again. They weren't entirely cured, but it shows you, these are like real life examples, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more and more examples. This isn't wishful thinking. There are testimonies where syntropic farming has worked when nothing else can. Okay, and these are some other benefits that I emphasize in our training in Haiti. This image is from the Inga Foundation, and these systems produce a lot of wood. I encourage the farmers to give back as much wood to the soil as you can. And the smaller the branches, the more nutritious it is to the soil. So I think it's reasonable for a farmer to take some wood for their own building and fuel needs, especially in developing countries. If you have enough land, a system like this will regenerate soil and provide for the family. Also, I mean, I've worked in the land in Haiti, and it's much more comfortable working environment, especially when the agroforest is a few years old and it starts creating shade. And when it's 4 or 5 or 6 years old and starts producing fruits at different times of the year, it's a pleasure to go to work. You're on your feet most of the time. You're doing pruning. On the left in this image would be the land that most people cultivate in Haiti. So they're having to till every year rock hard soil that's full of clay. They have to go through multiple passes. They're having to weed over and over again. It's backbreaking work. And tropic farming is a lot of work in the initial planting because you're establishing a dense system like this. But over time, it rewards the farmer. There's less weeding, you're more comfortable, you're on your feet, and it's perennials. They're just producing. They're just come and prune, give them the sun they need, care for the system, and it gives back multiple. Elo, go ahead and ask a question or say.
All right. Just had a quick question about the previous picture, when you have the deserted land and then the syntropic land. When you go into like say you're in Haiti and you enter a farm that's on the left and it's deserted, there's sparse dirt showing exposed. What is typically the first thing you do if they don't have anything? For example, not even biomass, just bare grass. What is something? What is the first steps you use to approach it?
Okay, that's a good question. So, well, first of all, often there's biomass that you don't realize. So when I was trying to bring in biomass, but it wasn't sustainable. When I first brought the Brazilians in, they would look at this situation and they would say, you know what, there is some grass out there, and we would come with a machete and harvest what we could. And you see those trees in the back, we would go up and prune them in a way that was helpful for the tree. And then we would, with a machete, cut up all the branches and leaves into little pieces and use those for the initial mulch. But even in that case, that only works if we're doing like a small, like a backyard kitchen garden or something like that. There are situations where you literally have to start with bare land. And I think that's the question you want. In that case, we grow, in that case, we plant in abundance and create living mulch. And we do it with species that are adapted to that early succession state. Um, two, um, two plants that we use a lot in Haiti right now are Napier grass, also called elephant grass, and pigeon pea. And those two so far will grow almost in any soil conditions. They produce a ton of biomass, and we're not harvesting the pigeon pea when we plant it in the tree line. Instead we're using it to create fertility, and we're pruning them. And so yeah, basically, and if the fertility gets a little better, if the land can sometimes be bare and have a little more fertility, then we can plant more finicky species like Mombasa, Teutonia or Mexican sunflower. You can plant bush beans and other crop plants and use those to create your biomass then to grow on. Did I answer the question there? And so those provide a nursery for the trees as well. And we grow trees we choose trees that tend to be very tough and can grow in tough conditions. And in a few years, they're producing the biomass. So if you can get your system to the age of tree production, then you're going to get your biomass. Okay, if I don't hear from you, I'm guessing I answered that.
No, you
Okay,
did. Thank
cool.
you.
Another benefit is as things are getting more and more expensive, it's less expensive. You don't need to purchase pesticides, insecticides. Farmers don't need to be exposed to these conditions. Farmers in the U.S. have a higher incidence of Parkinson's disease. Nobody will say exactly why, but we're all suspicious it's related to the health consequences of working with these inputs. And then I think this is my last slide in this little series of benefits. And most people here probably know this is the picture of Ernest Gouch's farm on the bottom. And then the top picture is a representation of what his land would have looked like before he started. And those who've watched Life in Syntropy know that when this is done on a large scale, it has ecosystem changing benefits. His farm creates small rainfall. It's like holding the moisture in the mornings and creating little rain clouds. All of the streams on his property that used to go dry during the dry season, they're holding water year round. It's obviously having a impact on his region, and if enough people do this sort of work, it is realistic to anticipate that it would have a positive return on ecosystem functioning. And this is proven both at the visible level, those things I mentioned, but also now with soil testing. So the newest soil science that recognizes soil life or soil biology is important for fertility, not soil. It recognizes that we need a new set of tests. And so this student of Elaine Ingham Soil Food Web program visited Ernst's farm and used these newer soil biology tests to compare the soil on his property, that's the far left, with a conventional cocoa farm, and then also compared to native forest that was 70 years old, and then compared to land that was degraded, similar to the way Ernest's land was before he started. And the graph on the left looks at the biomass of soil fungi. So it's the amount of mycorrhiza. And then the one on the right looks at bacteria. And it's that ratio. Actually, I don't have the ratio slide, but it's the ratio that's important. You want more fungus to bacteria. And so what you see is he has way more fungus to bacteria. I think the ratio was that resulted that he had 4 times more fertility by this measure compared to the native forest. And he started his work in the 80s. So we're talking about a 45-year-old system is 4 times more fertile by this measure than a native forest that's twice the age. And then, or maybe not twice the age, just 70 years old. And then, of course, it was way better than the degraded properties. And then they did a soil compaction test. They could barely detect any compaction on Ernest's farm, whereas all the other properties, as they went into the soil, the soil's compacted. And then the last test, when they're looking at the different microorganisms they would see on their slides, they would look for ones that are known to be pathogenic, and they couldn't find any on Ernest's farm. On all the other properties they had. So I think this is just very powerful scientific research that shows syntropic farming not only mimics nature, but when it's done correctly, it exceeds what nature does, and it can be a very important tool for us. Okay, now that we covered a lot of the benefits, there must be some sort of drawback or challenges, and here's the ones that I'm aware of. So a lot of the benefits are delayed. We're growing perennials, we're growing tree crops. You're investing all that work in the beginning. So to a typical farmer, they're putting a lot more work in, and it takes time before they see the results. And yeah, and of course, with these very complex systems we're planting, it takes a lot more time and effort than they're used to when they're planting a farm or a garden. And it's really farmers to start small with this so they can learn and get accustomed to it before trying to do a large area. You need a lot of seeds. You need to collect, and personally, we in Haiti collect them ourselves. They're free. You just have to get an eye for them and learn the cycles of the trees. You also need to learn some new skills. You need to learn to be more observant and letting the plants show you what they need. Learning more pruning skills. And yeah, I guess the last challenge is if you're hoping for ecosystem or large scale environmental benefits, you really need to do it on a large scale as well. Okay, I'm going to just pause a second. Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody want to add anything before I jump into the last section? I'm going to tell you what, actually, I would like people to unmute or write in the chat if you've had a Syntropic training before, just to get a feel for where the different people are that are here. Have you had a training either online or in person before? Are you familiar with this language? Have you studied enough online somehow? Okay, we got 2 yeses. Okay, not everybody is. Okay, we got a lot more answers coming. There's about 13 or 14 people on this call, and of everybody that answered, there were 2 that had not had a course yet. So, okay. I'm going to launch into this last section, try to keep us on our time. And so this section is, oh, go ahead. Oh, maybe that was an accident. So I like to teach in Haiti 3 keys. This is something I created. I don't know if Ernest likes this way of organizing the information. But anyway, it's helpful for us, and especially when we're out like on the land and we're walking through somebody's system and we see things aren't working. Almost always we can identify the problem by asking ourselves these 3 keys. And the 3 keys are: number 1, cultivating consortiums, the dense association of plants. Number 2, cut, or the strategic pruning to stimulate growth. And number 3, cover, with either mulch or with living plants the soil. So normally, if I go through those 3 C's, I can almost always identify what mistake we made and find a path forward out on the farm. So let's go a little bit more into detail what I mean by those 3 C's and how we envision those. So intelligent consortiums, the first C, to cultivate. What that refers to is I guess in permaculture language, it would be like companion planting or guilds. But in syntropic farming, it adds the element of natural succession or time. So it's like a really complicated guild. And the focus is on maximizing solar energy capture. So we kind of see the soil as like a battery, and the fertility is a result of charging that battery, and we do that through photosynthesis. So we're always doing our best to come up with a combination of plants that stays that grows densely over the land at whatever the current fertility level is, grabs as much solar energy as it can, and then stays dense over time. So when a plant is dying, we've planned to have a new species coming in. That's the element of natural succession. Okay. So what principles do we use to guide us into creating these dense consortiums? Well, the first one is stratification. And there's different ways to um, classify stratification. Ernst, I think, says in some Amazon rainforest there is 11, 12, or 13 different levels. He has different ways and different levels of complexity in categorizing them. I think nature doesn't have any categories or lines, so these are human created for us to help us strategize. And what I found is most of the time, just these four are enough. These four stratification levels are enough for the farmer to work with. And all I really want to say about stratification on this lecture is it helps us maximize the space vertically. So to build a consortium, we want to fill 3 dimensions. We want to fill the vertical dimension, which we use with stratification. We want to fill the horizontal dimension, which most farmers already know. That's just what's the closest you can plant your plant side by side and get a maximal harvest. And then the third dimension that we like to include is the dimension of time. And so we want to always be bringing in a new species when one species is either being harvested or dying. And again, there are lots of different ways in academia when talking about succession in nature. They have different classifications and terms for the different stages. Ernest used different terms when he's talking about agroforestry, so in agriculture. And I found in Haiti that and Ernest typically uses 6 stages. I'll just mention he usually has placenta. Is it 6, 1, 2, and 3? Actually, a 7, I believe. And then he calls the forest stage secondary, 1, 2. I think sometimes there's a 3, and then there's climax. So there's 6 or 7 stages of succession in the way that Ernest teaches. But what I found from a practical standpoint is if we just divide it in 4 like this, it works. It works if you fill these niches, and assuming your goal is producing tree harvest, this works. If you're trying to just grow vegetables, then of course you need to know all the 21-day cycle, 30 days, 90 day. It gets more complicated if you're trying to create a consortium with vegetables. But if you're trying to grow trees, I have found so far that just breaking it down into these 4 stages. And we love to use the term placenta because it helps us imagine that these early stage plants are creating the conditions for the more fertile plants. And we'll go more detail in my next training session into how we define this and use it on the farm. But for right now, let's just remember that this is important to fill the dimension of time, one of the 3 dimensions that we need to cover to create a dense consortium. Okay, if there's no questions, I'm going to go on to C, or to cut. And the cutting, nothing would work in a syntropic farm if it weren't for the second cut. If you planted the dense consortium and didn't manage, then your system would come to a complete halt. Okay? So the question is, how does pruning or cutting stimulate growth? How does it create a growth pulse? So to answer that question, we know a little bit about a plant life cycle, okay? All plants have a life cycle. Even trees that seem like they're there forever, they eventually age and die naturally, okay? So there's, on this curve, we see the early rapid growth phase, and the curve starts to slow, right? We see with flowering, it starts to slow, fruiting, seeding, the plant starts to often dry itself to create the seeds. Even the soil food web below it is drying up to create the conditions for seed propagation, and then the plant dies. Okay, this is just a very generic understanding. And when we come in and prune a plant that is, let's say it's in the flowering or the fruiting or even the seeding stage, what happens is it sets that plant back to the growth phase again. It's a rejuvenating signal. 90% of plants, when you prune them, they grow back. So how does it create a growth response? It's just resetting. It's like the fountain of youth for a plant. It's just resetting that plant back to that growth phase, okay? Again, this is a very generalistic graph. Of course, there are trees that sometimes have juveniles, like Lacena, that are flowering and seeding, and they're not close to death. But I'm just trying to create an example so people understand. And this holds true in most cases. Okay, and so now this visual helps see all of the first two principles put together, actually. So on the left, this individual's grown a very dense consortium. We can see the tree lines, multiple stratums, okay? In the middle, they've come through because they see, okay, it's really getting too overgrown, it's too shaded, it's time for pruning. Okay, the system's starting to slow down, it's time to prune. They have all that material, they put it down, and then the result of a heavy prune, assuming you've done everything right, is this rapid growth. And if we remember the soil science I talked about earlier in the soil food web, we can imagine that these tree rows, even though they're a few meters apart, are all connected underground. Their roots in the mycorrhiza are communicating, and when you cut a tree, it releases growth hormones that not only benefit that tree, but through the soil food web, all of the plants adjacent to them. Okay? And when you cut a tree, you know the soil exudates the sugars that the roots sweat normally. There is an increased production in that because the plant needs even more nutrients to regrow. And again, this has an effect on all of the plants adjacent to it. So a farmer is planting that biomass system closely integrated with his production system so that he can prune the biomass system, creates a disturbance that the production system benefits from. This is like a really important theory. I hope everybody is getting this. This is like the kind of the trick, the magic, okay? If anybody didn't get that that last slide, please let me know before I get too far down the road. But we'll go over it later in this training and also in future trainings. Okay, and then the third C that I like to describe is cover. Okay, cover the soil. And why do we cover the soil? I think everybody here probably knows this stuff, but the soil is the soil needs to be covered to create the environment for the soil microlife. Okay, that's maybe the single most important thing. This is what's creating fertility. Okay, this is what's helping retain moisture. This is what's creating a cool environment, preventing erosion. And last, and maybe just as important, this is also preventing weeds. And protection from weeds in the first few years. So all of this is a correct management. Never enough. In this image here, when we have limited supply, we concentrated on the tree lines because they're the future for your system. They're going to create the future fertility and biomass. So on the image on the left, you can see these two mounds, okay? Those two mounds that are running down a line are right on a tree line. In the valley in the center is where they have planted their trees and all the other plants, okay? So this is where we start. And if I didn't have material to plant like that, I would start by planting grass or pigeon pea or other plants that I can come harvest and then use those plants to create the biomass. And it's important when it comes to organic matter to do all or nothing at all. So this is a photo that Stephen Werner shared to me from a project in Madagascar. They were starting cocoa plantations. They had a similar situation as Haiti, almost no organic matter. So you can see in this image, everywhere you can see is cocoa plantation, and they use the same planting regimen. They planted the same species the same way. The only thing different is the area in the front, they used mulch. They heavily mulched with the materials they had, and they only had a small amount, so they had a small area. Look at the response. Look at the difference in growth of vegetation in that area that's been mulched compared to the rest. I mean, if you're working with farmers who are really hesitant to do syntropic farming, maybe the one little experiment that you could do with them is say, hey, about a few lanes in your product, we just mulch around your corn or what beans or whatever it is they're growing, and let them have a firsthand experience what happens when you start to do that. Okay, so those are keys. I'm gonna so again I'll just repeat those. The first is cultivate a consortium. The second is cut for growth, and the third is cover the soil. We're almost done with the presentation. They're going a little bit fast, but we'll have some time to talk at the end. So here's a couple images of success stories from different areas. And I hope one thing you'll see with these pictures is that there are no recipes for syntropic farming. If you apply them correctly in different situations, the end result will look totally different. And what I hope, and I know what Ernest hopes people take away, is not recipes from trainings, but instead they take away the principles, and they understand why the recipe that that person was using on that particular land was designed that way. And then you can substitute, modify, you can be inspired by a recipe, but you'll want to use what's best for your situation. So, okay, in this success story, the top image is a typical eucalyptus plantation in Brazil. These are a popular tree for timber because they grow super fast. You can harvest them, they'll grow back. But the tree is, when planted in such an unnatural way, is harmful for the environment. You can tell by looking at the picture that the ground is dry. And these systems are known to be sensitive to fire and to kill everything else beneath them. And unfortunately, eucalyptus was blamed for this end result as opposed to the way that the eucalyptus was being grown. But we can see in the image below, which is a citrus plantation, that eucalyptus is potentially bringing fertility, moisture, and greenness to the property. Here also are eucalyptus trees, which could be harvested in the future for timber. Also, you'll see grass, Mombasa in the middle, bananas, citrus. This is a beautiful system that's due for pruning, I can tell you. It's probably going to start slowing down real soon and needs to be pruned. But look at the difference in the overall effect of the eucalyptus when it's planted in its natural way and disturbed periodically. Then here's another reality. So this is a semi-arid, almost desert area. I believe this also is Brazil. And this is a before and after picture. So above is an area where there is no possibilities for farmers. Below, they created a system, and the main crop they were producing at this time was prickly pear cactus. They use a spineless variety which can be fed to cattle. And look at the production they're getting by planting with consortiums. I'm sure they were using all three keys, consortiums, cutting, and covering. And now the same property that was basically useless now is a food production area for cattle. Okay, and then here are some images from a very challenging location in Haiti. This happened to be the first area where we could put up a demonstration farm with the consultants that I'm working with in Haiti. And now I think it's 4 years old. And this land is so degraded that the bananas did not get more than knee high after 2 years. Just really, everything struggles to grow. But we accepted that situation because it's an opportunity to show, what we can do. And we did this without large scale inputs. So you can see the tree line on the left, and we used branch cuttings and lots of seeds. We had a very dense consortium planted. Let's see what happens. In 2 weeks, you can see the corn, and there may be some beans to sprout, and even some of the trees. Okay, we're hopefully you get an idea with this visual of how the system develops. Then we have corn and cabbage coming in, and the beans are more visible week 4. All the same plants, but now even more visible on week 6. Okay, 7 weeks, look, it's starting to jump there on the left. We have also some of the biomass plants. We used a plant called chaya. I'm not sure what I think that is the English term actually, and we use a lot of manioc or cassava, not for harvesting, but for building the soil. Here at 7 months, we returned after dry season, and look what we have, okay? I'll take that back. This would still been during rainy season. So at 7 months, just before dry season, we had a nice dense system, and we came in and pruned. If you look carefully at the tree line on the right, you'll see a lot of it's been cut already, and you'll see the people doing the work. Okay, then our system kind of got hard to take photos of. We had to climb up on a building to get pictures, and this was done in the morning, so the light's not so good. This is at 1.5 years, and this picture was just before we cut. The next picture here, it's like literally the next day after we came and did the management. Okay, and so it's a dance. We're planting the dense consortiums, we're cutting, they bounce back with a super amount of growth. We come and visit these just for a week or so every 6 months, so it's hard for me to get lots of pictures. Unfortunately, my next picture wasn't until 2.5 years, but you can see the trees. These are all planted by seed that they've now established. And then this is another system in a different location in Haiti that has much better climate conditions, planted in 2019 by Brian Beachy. And I took this picture during a recent trip there. He also, although his soil fertility is better, when he started, this soil was horrible. He describes it was totally bare soil. There were erosion cracks that he could fit his hand into, and he had a very difficult time planting because the soil was so compacted and dry. Now, 5 years later, he's getting tons of different fruits. It's hard to even, I'm not even sure everything we're looking at. I think there's some jackfruit on the right. There was a bunch of papaya that he got out of this system. There's breadfruit, mango, avocado, banana, star fruit. It's like a kitchen garden. So he planted for a diversity of fruits that will produce as many different times as the year as possible. So I love to include this image because it really shows the abundance and the fertility and what you can get back if you invest in a farm like this. Okay, we're on the last slide, last two slides here. So I just want to recap. I want to thank everybody for watching the video and for coming and watching this presentation. I hope after you leave, you have a better handle on what holistic farming practices mean instead of micromanaging the needs for your one crop at the destruction of the rest of the ecosystem. We're creating a holistic living system that will then grow your crop effortlessly. And we're doing that by understanding there's soil life that unlocks fertility, and that a forest through natural succession creates some of the best conditions to protect that soil life. And we're using solar energy to charge the battery of that soil life and feed those microorganisms. And we'll want to remember the three keys: cultivating consortiums, cutting for growth, and covering the soil for protection. And we can see by repeating those over and over again, you get results like we have here at Brian Beachy's. And we can have results, hopefully, like Ernest has had in Brazil at his farm, that extend far beyond just the area that he's harvesting cacao from, but also to his neighbors. So that's the end of my presentation. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. If anybody wants to ask any questions, I encourage you to do so. It looks like we're ahead of schedule.